I'm going to move next to a composer now, Howard Goodall. Howard.
Hi, yes, I'm a composer, a lyricist, and a conductor, and a broadcaster, and a writer. I want to speak up here for a slightly different model. We've all been talking about touring groups, bands, folk, jazz, etc., rock bands, and a lot of very famous names have been behind this campaign doing that. But of course, the vast majority of professional musicians are not famous, and they're not paid huge amounts of money to do what they do. There is another model, which is the professional classical instrumentalists and singers who go across to Europe to do their work and have done over the last 30 years to make a percentage, in some cases a very large percentage, of what they live on and how they support their families. And what's going to happen with these carnet costs, the additional insurance costs and the visa costs, is that the amount of money the average musician gets to play a gig in Berlin for one night or France for one night won't be enough to cover those costs. It will become an unviable profession. And this is absolutely devastating for thousands of people and their families. It's not just a question of pop stars, it is a question for ordinary musicians who are going to be absolutely clobbered by this when they discover how expensive it is. And we're talking at the moment about short-term gigs and short-term contracts. If you have a longer contract, for example, to sing in a musical or an opera for several weeks, you're going to need a much more expensive visa in some of these countries. And so I think that there's another issue, which is the cost in your own time of the bureaucracy of this. Now, when you want to apply for a visa to go and work in Spain, you have to hand over your passport. And if they've got your passport for 2 or 3 weeks, you can't go anywhere else in that time, and nor can you book a visa in any other country during that time. Your passport is sealed up, as it were, in the system, and that's going to happen to musicians the whole time who are applying in different countries. There used to be a system that the British government had to allow people who worked a lot internationally to have a second passport. I don't know why that scheme was abandoned, perhaps something to do with hostile environment, who knows, but that would be a very good thing to help musicians and others who have to tour abroad all the time or work abroad to be able to process this vast amount of bureaucracy that's coming their way. So that second passport, so I'd like to just note that. A lot of people say, well, they want us to compare ourselves with getting visas for the US. They say, well, if you can get a visa for the US, you need carnets for the US, what are you making a fuss about going to the EU? The difference with the US is this. It is very expensive and it's time consuming, and you need a lot of help from your sponsor organizations in the US. But once you've got your work visa, you can work across all 50 states of America. Every time you cross a state boundary, you don't have to open your van and show all your gear and show your customs gear. What's more, you can do a series of gigs in America which probably do make it viable and actually cover the costs of those expenses. But what you don't do is you don't go to New York for one night and come back and do a gig in London the next night and do another gig the next night in Berlin. That's what we have been doing for 30 or so years in the EU. What you do in America is you go for a block of time and you do your work there. And by the way, a new band starting out or a young classical musician who's just starting out in their career, it's very, very difficult, bordering on impossible, to get a visa for the United States. It's much easier if you're established or you've got big tours to do or you're a name, and you have to show an incredible array of the things that have happened in your career and your awards and your recognition in order to get those work visas for the US. So it really isn't a good comparison with what we have got used to in the EU. And I'm going to just quickly say that half of these problems, which Ian and many others have said, are to do with carnets and customs and not actually to do with visas. And the reason why we have all these problems with carnets and customs is because we withdrew, in my view, in an insane act from the customs union of the European Economic Area. And by the way, withdrawing from this customs union was not on the ballot paper in June 2016. And it's never been put to the British people whether they want to withdraw from the customs union. Right now, a Turkish musician, a Turkish band, a Turkish orchestra can tour across the EU much more easily and much less expensively than anyone from Britain. And Turkey is not, whatever Vote Leave tried to tell you, a member of the EU. And my final point would be this, that musicians, I'm pretty sure, care much more about this issue, much more than they do than the proposed festival of Brexit. And my advice to ministers would be, read the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. We perhaps should have had you on some of the Remain broadcasts, and perhaps the outcome might have been different, but that's a whole different topic. And